good to go. All right. Thank you for joining today. My name is Mike Boyle. I'm with Central Confinement Service here in Columbus, Nebraska, and we're going to talk about solar power today. And doing that is Jeff Berggren of Genpro and Eric Chancellor of Thomas Livestock, and he also is with Genpro. So we'll have them do their presentation, and then we'll have a question and answer afterward, if anybody has any.
Absolutely. So we'll go through the presentation fairly quick because I know there's typically a lot of questions with a product like this. So we'll get started here. There we go. All right, so just to give you guys kind of a scope of what sizes we have here. So this is our 25 kilowatt system that we have on a 6250 hog confinement facility. 25 kilowatts is going to do about 20% of our total production for the hog barn is what it's going to be. We'll get more into it later, but that's going to be about what the what NPPD currently allows us to build on a hog barn legally. So this is also a 25 kilowatt system we have on an older site. So that's a 1,000 head hog confinement facility. And then this would be a special pilot project we did with Dawson Public Power that is a 100 kilowatt facility. So 25 of it is still net metered, but then the other 75 kilowatts is just self-generation for the hog barn. And again, I'll get into more kind of explaining what exactly that is here as we go. We introduced ourselves already. So I'm Eric Chancellor. This is Jeff Berggren with Genpro. My dad is also here, Tim Chancellor. He's the wean to finish production supervisor for Thomas Livestock. So Jeff, if you want to get into kind of just the basics of solar energy and how it works.
Yeah, that's a good place to start, just in case people out there aren't familiar with how solar works in Nebraska and our surrounding states. Is the biggest misconception is that these are going to power the barns at the facilities if the power goes out. These are all grid tied systems we're talking about today, to where they're net metered. So everything from the solar system, you can see the panels at the top, is generated behind the meter. So as the electricity flows, it's inverted from the DC to the AC for the grid, and then it's used at the closest load. It just follows the path of least resistance. So if it's your fans running or lights or whatever else, it's going to be used there on site first. Now, in a hog confinement facility, that's not that big a deal because the fans run and stuff runs 24 hours a day. But if you're in a home situation, nobody's home during the day. They're all whoever's at work or at school. So you're generating all this electricity during the day. It's just basically flowing back out to the grid. And then when you come home at night, you pull it back off the grid. So in the old days, your meter would literally run backwards. Remember the meters with the actual dials on, would run backwards, and then at night it'd spin it back. It's all digital now, but it tracks it. So what you're doing is you're using that grid as a battery for when you need the electricity. And Nebraska does limit us to 25 kilowatts. That's what Eric mentioned. A lot of our barns are only 25 right now. There is a bill to expand it to 100 that they've been working for a couple of years. Should come. Our pilot project power is going very well, where they allowed the 100 kilowatts. And what we've essentially done is, to them, they only see 25 kilowatts. And through the software and the actual physical net connections, that other 75 kilowatts can never get to the net. So it's just used there on site. And that's offsetting 80% or so?
About 80%.
About 80% of that farm. They're working really well. They're all monitored, so we can maintain that all the time too, and make sure everything's working correctly. So that's.
I'm sorry, can we pause just a second? Can Lexi have the mouse so she can mute?
Absolutely. Yep. Sorry about that. No, all good.
There you go.
Perfect.
So with the costs and things where they are, the paybacks are looking good, even at the smaller 25 kilowatts. So we've seen quite an uptick in adoption here in Nebraska. South Dakota's looking, Kansas works well, Iowa is a little bit up in the air with their net metering stuff right now, but it can absolutely be done over there as well.
And for a hog confinement facility that has such a constant load, even if we don't have net metering, Genpro and solar companies in general can forecast exactly what they're going to need for production and then build a size of system custom to what you need to offset that production. So we're not actually going to be losing a bunch of energy by, not having that net metering, as long as we're sizing it correctly. All right, so the pilot program we've done, and this isn't out of the realm of possibilities, it's just up to the local public power districts. We've presented in some that were willing to try it, like Dawson. We presented in some that aren't willing to do it right now, and they're just going with whatever Nebraska Public Power approves. And it's really up to the discretion of them. They have an overriding rule compared to what NDPD has for them. So with Dawson, what we're doing is 3/4 of that system is self-generation. It's set up so the technology is not allowed to ever go back to the grid. So as it gets up, if the load's increasing, if we're producing 25 kilowatts of energy above what we need, the system recognizes that and it keeps it in perfect unison at 25 kW going back to the grid, only using what we need for the barn, and then the rest of it is actually shut down simultaneously as it's going through. So they've gotten really exact with the inverter capability of being able to monitor that and do it in real time. And Dawson Public Power has been extremely happy with it. We haven't gone over 25 kW back to the grid since it started. And I'm hoping we can see more of that in the future of people that trust the system are willing to be able to put those in. But for right now, the 25 kW is what we're limited to in most places. They do have to legally allow you to put 25 kW up on any meter you want to. They can't limit you less. Some places have also argued that we can't put up 25 kW at places, but we came back and shown them that they do have to allow that, even if they have too much solar in their district already.
So they have to allow the 25.
Yes.
Yep.
There's no way they can stop you from putting 25 up on anything. That's just more information about the pilot program there. And then going into the utilities in other states. I know you kind of touched on that briefly.
Yeah, so we don't want to scare anybody off, and we can help you navigate all these waters no matter what power district you're with or what utility you're in. Genpro specifically, we do work in 12 of the Midwestern states now, and we're licensed in 48. We have dealt with everything from the tiniest of electric co-ops in South Dakota to OPPD and Mid-America in Iowa. I put Iowa and South Dakota up there just because they're strange. South Dakota doesn't have net metering like Nebraska does. So it does you no good to produce extra. They will act as your battery, but if you produce extra, it doesn't matter. So our sizing in South Dakota for your system is going to be way different than it is in Nebraska, just to make sure the costs are the best. And Iowa is really in a state of flux with their net metering right now. I hear all kinds of rumors. At one time, they were the best in the nation by far. The net metering there, I believe, was up to 125%. They're going to knock that down, if they haven't already, to below 100. And then they're going to probably limit it to either a percentage of your oversizing, or it may be limited to 75 kilowatts. I've heard both. I'm not sure where that is. In Nebraska, it is 25 kilowatts AC. If you've ever had that question, make sure you tell your utility that, because they'll argue that as well. There is a loss of system, or a little loss between the DC rating and the AC rating. So you need to make sure from the onset that the utility is talking about AC. Now they all work in the AC world, but they've come back to us and actually said that it's a DC limit. So that's something to navigate. I've been doing this for 13 years. I've seen it all. I've seen a lot of the tricks, and it's really shifted in this last 2 years to where they've really opened up and made it a lot easier, especially in the ag sector, is where we need it.
And even with the net metering, if you've got a house or a small shop that only needs 5 kW, you'd say, well, why don't I just throw 25 up and sell 20 kW back? They don't buy the energy back for what you use it for. So most places in Nebraska are anywhere from 7 to 14 cents a kilowatt hour is what we're getting charged. They only buy it back for 3 to 5, depending on the district. So it's really not cost effective, and your buyback is going to really increase if you're overproducing too much. So even with the net metering, we may go down to a 15 kilowatt size system for a shop, just because it's not cost effective for us to bring it up there. So,
and if these laws should change or shift in either way, for the good or for the bad, these systems are completely expandable now. They are basically plug and play, knowing that across the country, system sizing is going up and up and up and up. So everything we develop from a 5 kilowatt to the 25 kilowatt standard is ready to go to 50 kilowatts, to 100, whatever it is. You're not going to have to replace what you already have. It's just going to be added on to.
Something just real quick while we're on that, and the sites that you saw up there that they were showing you with the solar on the hog buildings are my sites that we put the solar on. And one thing I will say, as we've dealt with different public power districts and stuff, when we find there's resistance there, it's typically because a company has come in and overbuilt a system done things wrong, caused problems, and then they come out and just shut your meter off, you're done. So that's one of the reasons we've been working with Genpro. I'm very comfortable with their technology department coming together, getting everything right, sizing it correctly, and building it correctly, so there is no selling extra panels to get a buck and walking down the road to the next place, because that just creates problems. All of us understand that. So I've been very happy with the way they built it, the project with Dawson Public Power, with the intense monitoring with that pilot project. Everything's performed exactly like they've said it's going to, and that's very important when we're dealing with MPPD and with our local public power. There's quite a bit of legislation going on. I'm involved with that right now to change some of the rules in Nebraska so we can self-generate up to a certain percent. And again, that has to be on a fair basis. We can't produce 110% of what we use and still have the power company put the poles and everything in. There's a limit there. And that's where we structured this, that 80% self-production and still buying 20%. Doesn't change the rate for your neighbor, doesn't change anything, lets the power company still survive and get their dollar. And so it's been a good process.
That's a perfect lead in for my public service announcement. If you guys have been listening to the radio lately, you've been hearing from LES, OPPD, and MPPD on TV and the radio about unrealistic solar claims that are being made out there right now. There is a company operating. They were only in Lincoln and Omaha. They've since moved west. They've made it to Grand Island. If something seems to be true, it probably is. If you get a quote before you do anything, call your utility. As this administration keeps saying more and more about potential enticements to go renewable, you're going to see the snake oilsmen start showing up again. We saw it with the wind turbines and everything else years ago. So call your utility first, because they are your ally in the long run, even if they make it difficult. So that's just, I'm glad Tim mentioned that. There's a company operating in the state right now that's doing some pretty bad things. So
Makes it tough for everybody.
it makes it tough for everybody.
And there's companies out there bidding it without the electrician. You pay the electrician once you put it in, you do this. So they're trying to, all the sales gimmicks.
Yeah.
Here it is, do it right, or, oh, wait, you could do it this way, but yeah.
So somebody asked MPPD, well, how bad is it? People are falling for this. It's bad enough to take their advertising dollars, our rate that we all pay into basically, and put out the message out there. So like I said, they were in Lincoln, Omaha, they're moving west, and you guys will bump into them here in Columbus before too long, I'm sure. So the two options, these are either what we call microinverters or string inverters. So the string inverters have their own benefits, and the microinverters have a bunch of benefits. So most of what we're doing now on the roof is the microinverters. And we like those because each inverter only converts 4 of the panels. And each of those panels is monitored then, so you get a nice display on your system. If one panel's dirty, you're gonna know it. The string inverters don't quite offer that. They go to a string that goes down to about 4 panels, so you can tell the string there. Now I'm getting into the weeds a little bit there, but the string inverters are also a little more efficient, and they provide a little more access for the bigger system. So if we're going to 100 kilowatts or something where we have to curtail it, like Eric and Tim are doing. So if you got to choke it down to the 25 kilowatts, you'll have to go with the string inverters, and they sit outside on a system like that. That's those 4 boxes on the top side. Now, do you go on the roof or not? If your roof slopes facing to the south and you've got the snow loading data for your barn, which we have never run into a barn yet that had any troubles. Each panel only weighs about 35 pounds, and what were we, 2 pounds per square
2
inch?
pounds per square foot is what the snow and wind load is. Typically, they're built 5 over, so anywhere they're built. So we haven't run in. I did hire an engineer when I did it to make sure that we were all all my buildings were okay. Just so I didn't have any troubles there.
I've yet to run into a roof in Nebraska that, with our snow loading requirements and the quality of most of our buildings, that hasn't been an issue yet. So if the roof faces south, it's absolutely the best option to put it up there. It's a little bit cheaper than putting it on the ground. But if your barn faces north to south, so you've got an east and a west side, with those microinverters especially, we just up the size of the array a little bit. And as the sun comes over, first the east side catches it, then the west. Now that used to lose about 25% of it. We rarely ever did that. We just put it on the ground. Now it's only losing 10 to 15%. So it's not that bad. You can just upsize the panels. The ground mount is great if you've got the space. Something ever happens to the building, you don't have to worry about it. If you've got space right next to it, it costs a little bit more. But since we put those at the best angle for throughout the year, they generate a little bit more because they're at a really good angle to catch the sun in the winter and the summer and the average in between. So ground mount is a great option. Roof mount is a great option. There really is no price difference in the return of investment because it costs a little more, produces a little more. So works out really good. If it is going to be curtailed, it will be the string inverters, but that's it's not the older technology. It's just a different technology than the micros. So yeah, ground mount, if you've got the ground, if you've got a south facing roof, definitely we'll look at both options.
So what is the optimal angle, or does that change with geography?
It does. That's a great question. It lets me get really nerdy. It's actually your latitude. So whatever your latitude is, if you're at 38 or 40 or whatever it is, that's the perfect angle for catching as much as you can in the winter and as much as you can in the summer. Some of the racking is out there that allows you some adjustment to that, but with our winds and things here in Nebraska, they were way more trouble than they were worth, and they would only gain 10-15% a year. So you're better off just buying the extra panels if you want extra production and getting that solid base out there.
If you did I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
If you did a ground mount, how close do you have to be to your building?
So we need to be with either the transformer, the line, or the meter within 300 feet.
Oh, okay.
And then the wire sizing gets to be cost prohibitive. And there's also with the USDA grant, that has to be so close.
If you have more than 500 feet of buried cable, you have to go through a tribal burial ground and environmental study that takes a significant amount of time. So you want to keep it inside, else it can be.
Well, the real thing is,
so
the size of the wire gets really pricey. The closer the better.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
You can be within 50 feet of your transformer, you're
and usually it's
100 or
yeah,
200.
So
Yeah, and that's why the roof works so good. I mean, you're right there.
Yeah. And if you do it on the barn, there's actually a way you can tie into your
Panel
box as well, where you don't even have to go into the transformer and it's just right in the panel box. We have a couple barns that there was no burying of cable, anything. It came right off the roof, down the wall, just drilled a hole in straight into the wall and it was right there. So
We saw those when we were up there.
yep, you did. So that was one of the barns we went and looked at.
In reality, we only need 2 to 4 30 amp breakers for most of these systems.
And we'll get into questions and answers later, but one that'll come up is if you put it on the roof, what about replacing tin after a hailstorm or different things? And they'll go through what they're rated for and that type of thing. And you guys can allude to maybe some backing on that tin that's under those panels to keep moisture barrier and that type of thing.
Solar is super low maintenance. One of the nice things out here, as far as our employees that work the barns every day, if there is an issue, say there's a fire or something, or they need to shut it off, this button right here on this red box is all you have to do. You push that, it's a rapid shut off switch, shuts everything down instantly. So there's no electrical knowledge needed for any of this. It's extremely basic and anybody can operate it, turn it on and off as they need to. Do you want to talk about financial benefits or do you want me to go through?
You can go through some of it and then I can add what you have.
So some of the financial benefits that you can get with solar, some of the incentives they have right now. The big one is the Rural Energy for America program grant. So that's through the USDA. You can ask for up to 25% of your project costs. It is a little bit cumbersome to get through the application process. You know, you can hire somebody out. I've written grants for a number of people in the solar projects that we've done. Typically you don't ask for the full 25% because the less you ask for, the more likely you are to get the project. So you try to find that sweet spot there. I think we ended up getting about 12% of our costs covered, is what it was.
10%.
Yeah, so.
There's a lot of factors in that, if you're a veteran, if you're,
Yeah.
there are different things. that
Just
go-
a score sheet that they go through on it, but we did those. It's a really good, cost benefit for us. You don't have to pay that money back. It's just a grant that's paid straight to you. The dollar and energy savings loan is something that Nebraska has specifically for renewable energies. It's a 10-year term with very low interest. I think yours is a
2.5% for 10 years, and it's 100% loan.
so no down payment.
Put $1 into it.
Most of your local banks will have done a loan like that before. It's really easy, and they're really willing to do them because they end up selling off, is it 90%?
75% is covered by the energy department, so they're holding the note on 25%, but they get the interest for the entire thing.
Yeah.
So it really jumps in at about 8% return on the banks. I mean, it's.
The banker figures that out.
The banker knows. If your bank won't do it, mine will. They'll write it for anyone that wants it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll need their card.
Can't go through credit unions, find out.
Yeah,
Credit unions
Yep.
and, or, yeah.
farm credit, they're just not a recognized lender to do it, so there are some places that don't do it. A couple things that I don't have up here, so you've got your tax credit, which is currently at 26%. They're talking about raising it back up to 30%, but nothing's done yet. That's with the infrastructure bill. I believe it's tied into it, but 26% tax credit on the total project cost that you can take. You can take that for up to 10 years after your project's built if you extend it out.
So I would say check with your accountant on that. Everybody's tax situation's a little bit different. It's a double win because you get 26% of the entire project for tax credit right off your bill.
That's credit, not deduction.
That's credit. So if I am paying $50,000 in tax and I have $75,000 tax credit, I can use 50 of it this year and then 25 next year, whatever that is, okay? It's makes a lot of difference. And on top of that, you can depreciate 85% of the entire project, less your grant, okay? But say no grants involved, 85% accelerated depreciation. You want it all this year? Yeah, so it's, from a program standpoint, it's a real win on taxes.
So by the time you add up all the benefits, they're really paying for over half of the system by the time you add everything in for it. So that really helps with your payback and with everything else that goes into the project. So a payback example here. Right now, a lot of it depends on how much your utilities are, because if your utilities are cheaper, obviously the solar you're generating doesn't have as much value. If your utilities are higher, you're gonna have a faster payback. So with the tax credits and depreciation added in, but not the grant, we don't add the grant into the payback, we're anywhere from about 8 years to 14 years on our payback right now for break even. So that's where we're at right now, just depending on utility costs, ground mount versus roof mount, things like that. But pretty much everything is within that payback range right now for Nebraska.
We try to be as conservative on that. We don't want to oversell that, but we only pull in like a 2% escalator for rates, where in Nebraska specifically, our rates stay the same for 5 years and they bump. It's like that. So we're trying to be really conservative. I think the best paybacks I've had lately have been 6.5 years or so. So if you hear something better than 7 years, be really leery on any system.
So if you relate it to like our swine confinement barns, we're looking at 10, 12-year payoff. I mean, it's kind of, when I looked at doing this and putting everything together, it's like building another building, but I don't have to hire any employees. I put this up, it pays off in 8 years, and then it's money back in my pocket every month.
That includes the tax credit and all of those things that are all wrapped up in.
Sure.
Not the grant. If you get the 25% grant, it's gonna knock it way
It's
down.
just on top.
Yeah, we don't put that in there
It's
because
just
we don't know if you're gonna get it or not.
These are only guaranteed things that we're putting in this payback. We don't do anything that's an if or situation there, just because we don't want to deceive anybody on what they might or might not get, so.
But you're right, the payoff does include the tax benefits, okay? So you're still gonna have that payment to pay that system off.
Right.
Okay, so rather than paying the 50,000 in tax, you're gonna be paying 50,000 of the system, but you're paying for something you're gonna own to then save you that after it's paid off. So that payment's still there.
Good.
You can't go to the Bahamas on it.
Yeah.
Until it's paid off. There you go.
Typical lifespan of a solar system is about 30 years. You know, we've got some out there that are at that point or further now, so they're at least 30 years is what they're going to be at. Most of the materials are going to be warranted for 10 years. Just depends, the panels, the racking, everything has different warranties, but they're all around that same 10-year area. As far as durability goes, you know, you worry about having to replace things. The panels are rated for up to softball size hail, so they're very durable. And then a golf ball sized hail and is it 50-mile-an-hour wind? Just what it's rated.
So, yeah, that kind of differentiates, we'll get to the hail question, I'm sure, so
Yeah,
I might as well
yeah,
get to it. That kind of differentiates the panels we sell. They're all utility grade. We've built, of the 22 solar farms in Nebraska, we've built 18 of them. And there's only 7 vendors that we actually deal with. And our panels are rated at a much higher rate than what you'd find at Menards or Home Depot or even a lot of the residential installers. So our panels are bigger physically, and they're much more stringent. So for the hail rating, they shoot a cannon, they take a steel ball bearing 1 inch in diameter and hit that panel at 90 degrees. Not only do they hit it in the center, they hit it at the edge where they're most vulnerable. And it has to take that. And they all do that. And then so we've got, I want to say over 100,000 panels across Nebraska and South Dakota now, but we're right around there. We've lost fewer than a dozen to hail. And we've had some crazy recorded winds at Hastings, McCook, or Scottsbluff and Venango, 90-mile-an-hour. You can't call them gusts because they lasted for like 10 seconds. And the associated hail was at least 1.5 inches in diameter. We lost, I think we've never lost a panel in Lexington. Venango lost a couple, and it's next to a railroad tracks. And I'm almost pretty sure that it was picking up rocks off the railroad tracks and throwing them into our panels because it was the bottom road that got shattered. That being said, they also have a performance warranty he mentioned. So it used to be, we had to work with utility, we had to guarantee they'd only lose less than 1% per year. So if you had a 300-watt panel or 400-watt panel, it would lose 4 watts per year. We've had panels installed now for 7 years, and they've lost less than 0.5% per year. So that performance warranty isn't going to be anything over the long term. And all our agreements now, they used to be 20 years with the communities or utilities. They're all 30 years now. So all of our equipment is expected to last 30 years out there in the field.
Just a quick question. The 30 years, does that vary if it's roof mount or ground mount, or either one?
Yep, either one. Our racking system is a little different. There's a nationwide company called Iron Ridge that Genpro teamed up with about a decade ago. They built a pretty robust, not only rooftop, but ground mount system. And we came in our fabrication shop up there, we made it even more robust for the wind and the snow loading here. So we've got Genpro's branded racking that's actually from a national based company just to deal with our stuff. So it's all warranted through that. Most inverters just through the company are 5 or 10 year warranty, but a lot of times you can extend that.
So this is just an example of Dawson Public Power's utility rates, kind of what we've been dealing with. So the distribution charge that's highlighted, that's just your monthly charge for being connected. That's something you'll have to pay whether you're on completely solar 100% or not. You know, we've got summer winter rates there, 9.7 and 8.7 kilowatts. That's what we're paying on anything that we don't offset. And then the right side, which we're interested in, is the net metering and what they're paying back to us. So again, in the summer, they're going to pay us 4.7 kilowatts for anything we overgenerate, 3.6 for anything that we're overgenerating there in the winter. So we actually haven't had any that we've paid back on any of our hog barns. So we've used all of the energy every single month since we've actually built them. And the nice thing is they're not looking at it at a 15-minute interval or a day basis. It's just a monthly charge. So for example, if you use 10,000 kilowatts of energy and you produce 8,000 kilowatts, you're going to get a bill for 2,000 kilowatts of energy. If you need 10,000 and you generated 12,000, you're going to get a credit at around 4 cents a kilowatt hour for that extra 2,000 watts of energy. So it's not like you're having a day where the barn's empty and it's super sunny out and you're having to sell that energy back at a reduced rate. It's over a month is what it is. So there's very few instances in the modeling we've done where it's actually going to be overproducing. there's times where if your barn's empty and it's in the spring where it's cold out and you've got a perfect sunny day for like 2 weeks straight, then you might get it. But that's really the only situation we found that would even sell back at this point.
This brings up another interesting thing. Call your utility about your rate, call us or call CCS, because this rate didn't exist when Eric and I started
Sure,
this.
yeah.
They were on a completely different rate. They hadn't announced it to the public yet. And when we told them we we're gonna do solar, oh, well, this is all right. So that changed all our modeling for the payback and everything else. And so I've seen other developers come in and say, well, here's your payback. Well, they look at the standard residential rate, the highest one they can find, and say, here's your payback based on that. You've got to find out which rate you are now and what rate you're going to be after the solar gets in. That's pretty important.
It did actually benefit us, so
Yeah,
this
that
rate was cheaper than what we were paying beforehand, so, don't know why that was, but it did happen, so it was a good thing.
So
for us.
while we're on this, just real quick, I mean, when I looked at doing this, I wasn't looking to produce a bunch of energy and sell it back to the power company. I'm not in the energy production business for somebody else. I look at the left side, and that average of 9 cents that I'm saving, not paying a bill every month, is what I was interested in. And as I ran the numbers for my own situation, basically came up to a term that we all use in the pig industry, $2 a space. And we make a lot of decisions every day on a penny or 2 penny or 3 cents a space. And that was a number, like, everybody's gonna have figures their own depending on the rates and everything, but that was a huge number to me. And so it made my decision pretty easy.
Yeah. Absolutely. One of the great things about working with Genpro so far is they've been very progressive with making sure they're covering biosecurity for us as well. So they're disinfecting their trucks and equipment if they're going from site to site. We've done a couple different companies now. We've put solar systems up on. We've trained them on downtime, disinfection, shower in, shower out processes if they did have to go into the building. So they're, we're confident that they're actually following the rules that we need them to keep our facilities safe, which is one of the most important things in our industry. So been very happy with them jumping on and making sure that they're taking care of that for us. So this is some of the monitoring data that I see on the customer side for me. So I can get on my computer, got an app on my phone where you can go in and you can see 15-minute intervals of what you're producing real time. So this is one that's off of one of our bigger projects. You can see as the sun comes up, you're generating. You can see the flat line up there at the very top. So that's when we capped out at our 25 kW max. And then as the sun goes down, you drop off. You've got some cloud cover in there that drops it a little bit. But even on a cloudy day, you're going to actually generate some energy still. It's not just a complete shut off when it's cloudy outside. So if the sun's out, you're going to be generating something. You can see up on the top right, that's just day by day how much we're producing. So there is some fluctuation just depending on weather and things, but there's not any day where it's just not producing anything. You're always going to be having some kind of generation during the day. It's nice too, because like on my phone, I can pull it up and I've got a grid that you can see every single panel on and what it's producing at that time, real time. So if you've got a panel that's out, broken, something, you can get on there and see it, call Genpro, say, hey, I've got something down, and they can get on and find out what's going on with it for you. So it's nice just to have that real time. It's not just something that's sitting out in the field and you don't know whether it's working or not. They've got the
Watch it as you get a little snow on the panel, and as it melts off, which panels are melting off.
Yep.
Ramp up, ramp down. Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yep. And then this is some monitoring data from Dawson Public Power, actually, that they use to track all of the solar systems. And this bottom line is what they are tracking for the net metering. So for that big 100 kilowatt system we have on a barn, the stuff that's above the x-axis there is going to be what we're generating. And then the stuff below the x-axis is what we're sending back to the grid at any one time. So this is what they're using to determine whether we're using more than what we're producing or producing more than what we're using. So they go through and this just all gets totaled up and it's just a bottom line at the end of the month of what we used and what we produced. So most tracking software, most utilities, or some utilities at least, have this tracking software to where they can go on and see exactly what you're doing and keep track of it themselves too. But that just goes back to the relationship with the utility. We offered us personally, because of this pilot project, to show them any data that they wanted to on ours, just to be honest and upfront and show exactly what we're doing and that we're not trying to hide something from them. So I think we've done a pretty good job of establishing that relationship with the utility. And I think it's benefited us in the long run for sure. So, but yeah, that's kind of the ins and outs of tracking the data and what you can see on a day-to-day basis from it. And that's about all we have. So it's yeah, a lot of information to go through. So whoever online or in the room, if anybody has any questions that you want to ask or things.
Yep.
Does your monitoring boxes and all that, do they have to be mounted outside? Like your picture showed all the boxes and stuff are outside?